This engaging story, The Inheritance Trap, is a journey of betrayal, purpose, and genuine connection. Silas grapples with his grandmother's unexpected will and the harsh breakup with Astrid, who only loved his anticipated inherited wealth. Readers will follow Silas as he steps up to lead the Eleanor March Foundation, transforming his life through meaningful STEM education work for underprivileged youth. The Inheritance Trap: How a Will Exposed a Gold Digger and Led to True Love. Part 1. The Vigil. The hospice room smelled of lilacs and death, an unsettling combination that Silas March would never forget. His grandmother, Eleanor March, lay in the adjustable bed by the window, her breathing shallow and rhythmic, a metronome counting down her final hours. At 93, she had lived a full life, built an empire from nothing, and now prepared to leave it all behind with the same quiet dignity she'd brought to everything else. Silas sat in the chair beside her bed, holding her papery hand. The late afternoon sun filtered through the curtains, casting everything in amber light. He'd been there for 6 hours straight, and his body ached, but he couldn't bring himself to leave. These were the last conversations they'd ever have, even if Eleanor could barely speak anymore. "You should eat something," said from the doorway. Silas looked up at his girlfriend of 18 months. Astrid Lind was beautiful in that effortless Scandinavian way, blonde hair that fell in perfect waves, ice blue eyes, cheekbones that could cut glass. She wore a designer dress in subdued gray, appropriate for the setting but unmistakably expensive. She'd been there every day for the past 2 weeks, bringing him coffee, rubbing his shoulders, playing the devoted partner. "I'm not hungry," Silas said. "You need to keep your strength up." Astrid moved into the room, her heels clicking softly on the linoleum. She placed a hand on his shoulder, her perfume, something French and costly, briefly overpowering the lilac scent. "Eleanor wouldn't want you making yourself sick." As if summoned by her name, Eleanor's eyes fluttered open. Despite her weakened state, her gaze was still sharp, still intelligent. She looked at Silas first, and her thin lips curved into the ghost of a smile. Then her eyes shifted to Astrid, and something changed. The smile faded. If Silas hadn't been watching so closely, he might have missed the way his grandmother's hand tense in his grip. "Silas," Eleanor whispered, her voice like dry leaves. "Come, closer." He leaned in, bringing his ear close to her lips. "Be careful," she breathed. "Not everyone loves you for the right reasons." Silas pulled back, searching her face. "Gran?" But Eleanor had already closed her eyes again, exhausted by the effort of speaking. Her breathing returned to that steady, mechanical rhythm. "What did she say?" Astrid asked. "Nothing important. She's confused." Silas squeezed his grandmother's hand gently. "The morphine, you know." Astrid's expression was unreadable. "Of course." That night, Eleanor March died peacefully in her sleep. Silas was there, holding her hand until the very end. Astrid was there too, standing behind him, her hands on his shoulders. When the nurse confirmed the time of death, Astrid held him as he wept. She whispered soothing words and stroked his hair, and Silas felt grateful that he wasn't alone, grateful that someone loved him enough to share this pain. He had no idea that the trap was already closing around him. Part 2. The Reading. The law offices of Hutchinson and Gray occupied the top 3 floors of a glass tower in downtown Chicago. Silas had been there only once before, when his grandmother had asked him to witness some documents. Now he returned for the reading of her will, dressed in the same black suit he'd worn to her funeral 3 days earlier. Astrid came with him, of course. She'd been inseparable since Eleanor's death, constantly attentive, always available. She'd even taken time off from her job, something vague in marketing that Silas had never fully understood, to be there for him. "Are you nervous?" she asked, as they rode the elevator to the 42nd floor. "A little," Silas admitted. "It feels so final, you know. Once the will is read, that's it. She's really gone." Astrid squeezed his hand. She'd been quiet that morning, almost distracted. Silas had attributed it to the solemnity of the occasion. The conference room was all dark wood and leather, with windows overlooking the Chicago skyline. Besides Silas, there were only a few other people present: Eleanor's longtime attorney, Richard Hutchinson, her accountant, Martha Y., and 2 representatives from various charities Eleanor had supported over the years. Silas found that odd. Where were the other relatives, the distant cousins and second nephews? Eleanor's fortune was substantial. Her technology company had been acquired by a larger firm 20 years ago for a sum that had set her up for life, and she'd invested wisely. Surely there should be more people eager to claim their piece of the pie. Richard Hutchinson was a thin man in his 60s with silver hair and a somber demeanor. He gestured for everyone to sit, then opened a leather portfolio containing Eleanor's last will and testament. "Thank you all for coming," he began. "Eleanor March was a remarkable woman, and it was my privilege to know her for over 30 years. She spent considerable time ensuring her final wishes were clear and properly executed. What I'm about to read represents not just her legal will, but her deepest values and hopes for the future." Astrid leaned forward slightly in her chair. Silas noticed her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Hutchinson began reading. The legal language was dense, but the meaning became clear quickly. Eleanor had left personal items, jewelry, photographs, a few pieces of furniture to Silas. Everything else, the house in Evanston, the investment portfolio worth approximately $47 million, the stocks, bonds, and various other assets, was to be placed in a charitable trust. "The Eleanor March Foundation," Hutchinson read, "shall be established to support educational opportunities for underprivileged youth with particular focus on STEM education for girls and minorities. Silas March, my beloved grandson, is named as the Foundation's executive director should he choose to accept the position. A salary commensurate with such work will be provided. The Board of Trustees will manage the financial aspects, but Silas will direct the charitable mission." Silas sat in stunned silence. He'd expected... Well, he wasn't sure what he'd expected. Money, certainly. Enough to pay off his student loans, maybe buy a house. He'd never imagined his grandmother would leave almost everything to charity. But as the shock faded, something else emerged. Understanding. This was exactly like Eleanor. She'd built her fortune through intelligence and hard work, and she'd never approved of inherited wealth creating idle rich kids. She'd told him countless times, "Make your own way, Silas. That's how you build character." And she'd given him something potentially better than money, a purpose, a way to honor her memory and make a real difference. "Holy shit," Astrid breathed beside him. Silas turned to her. Her face had gone pale, her blue eyes wide with shock. But it wasn't grief or surprise he saw there. It was something colder, calculation, disappointment. "Astrid," he said. She seemed to realize he was looking at her and quickly rearranged her features into a more appropriate expression. That's a lot to take in. A charity? I mean, that's very noble of Eleanor, but what? Nothing. We'll talk later. She placed a hand on his knee, but it felt perfunctory now, mechanical. The meeting continued. Hutchinson explained the structure of the foundation, the board members Eleanor had already recruited, the initial projects she'd outlined. Silas would have an office, a staff, and the authority to direct millions of dollars towards causes he believed in. It was overwhelming and exciting and terrifying all at once. After the meeting, Silas tried to talk to Astrid about it, but she was weirdly distant, checking her phone repeatedly. "Is everything okay?" he asked as they walked to the parking garage. "Fine," she said curtly. "I just need to think." "Think about what?" She stopped walking and turned to face him. In the harsh fluorescent lighting of the garage, she looked different somehow. Harder, older. "Silas, are you really going to take that job? Running the charity?" "I think so, yes. It's what Gran wanted. And honestly, it sounds meaningful. I've been feeling pretty lost since I finished my master's degree. This could be... It pays how much? $80,000 a year?" "That's a good salary," Silas said, confused by her tone. "It's nothing, Silas. It's barely middle class. Do you know what you could have had? Your grandmother was worth almost $50 million, and she left you basically nothing. The words hit him like a slap. She left me a legacy, a chance to do something important. She left you a job. Astrid's voice had gone cold. A job you could have gotten anyway, without waiting for her to die. What the hell is wrong with you? Silas demanded. My grandmother just died. She was the most important person in my life, and you're standing here talking about money? Money matters, Silas. It's easy to pretend it doesn't when you thought you were about to inherit millions. I never cared about that. Bullshit. Astrid pulled her keys from her purse. Everyone cares about money. And if you're too naive to see that your grandmother screwed you over, then you're more pathetic than I thought. Silas stared at her, genuinely confused. Why are you being like this? I don't understand. For just a moment, Astrid's mask slipped completely. He saw the calculation there, the cold assessment. She was deciding something, weighing options. You know what? She said finally. I don't think this is going to work out between us. What? Us. This relationship. I don't think we're compatible anymore. Anymore? Silas felt like he was having a stroke. Nothing made sense. Astrid, my grandmother just died. We just came from her will reading. This is the worst possible time to— There's never a good time, she cut him off. I've been thinking about this for a while. We want different things. We do? I want security, stability, a real future. You want to play philanthropist with other people's money for 80 grand a year. The truth hit him then, sudden and harsh. You were with me for the money. You thought I was going to inherit millions. Astrid had the grace to look away. Don't be dramatic. How long? His voice shook. How long were you just waiting for her to die so you could cash in? I never wished Eleanor harm, but you were there. Every day at the hospice, playing the devoted girlfriend, bringing me coffee and rubbing my shoulders and acting like you cared. The memories were reframing themselves in his mind, taking on new and uglier meanings. You never even liked her, did you? You only pretended because you thought it would pay off. I need to go, Astrid said, turning toward her car. That's it? You're just leaving? She paused with her hand on the door handle. What do you want me to say, Silas? That I love you? I don't. I thought you were going to be rich, and you're not. This is just cutting our losses. Our losses? He laughed bitterly. You haven't lost anything. You never invested anything real in the first place. And you never would have been anything without your grandmother's money, Astrid shot back. You're 27 years old with a useless degree in philosophy, living in a shitty apartment and working part-time at a bookstore. The only interesting thing about you was your rich grandmother, and now she's dead and you're nobody. The words were designed to hurt, and they succeeded. Silas watched her get in her car and drive away, taillights disappearing into the gray Chicago afternoon. He stood alone in the parking garage for a long time, trying to process what had just happened. His grandmother was dead, his girlfriend had revealed herself to be a monster, and he was supposed to somehow pick up the pieces and run a charitable foundation? The weight of it all crushed down on him. He sat down right there on the concrete, put his head in his hands, and wept. Part 3. The Foundation. The Eleanor March Foundation officially opened its doors 6 weeks later. The offices occupied a renovated brownstone in Lincoln Park. Eleanor had purchased the building years earlier, apparently anticipating this exact use. The ground floor held a reception area and conference rooms. The second floor housed Silas's office and workspace for the small staff. The third floor was dedicated to program space for the kids they'd be serving. Silas threw himself into the work with an intensity that bordered on obsession. It was easier than thinking about Astrid or processing his grief or confronting the loneliness that had settled over his life like a heavy fog. The first few months were overwhelming. Despite Eleanor's planning, there was so much to figure out. Program design, grant applications, partnerships with schools, hiring staff. Silas worked 12, 14-hour days. He learned about nonprofit management, fundraising, program evaluation. He met with community leaders and educators and the kids who would benefit from Eleanor's generosity. Slowly, purpose began to replace pain. The Foundation's first major initiative was a summer STEM camp for middle school girls from underserved neighborhoods. Silas worked closely with the program director, Hannah Kim, to design a curriculum that was both rigorous and fun. They recruited volunteers from local universities and tech companies, secured lab space, and selected 40 girls for the inaugural session. On the first day of camp, Silas stood in the Brownstones' third-floor classroom and watched the girls file in. Nervous, excited, uncertain. They came from all over Chicago, from neighborhoods where opportunities like this simply didn't exist. They represented exactly what Eleanor had cared about: potential, intelligence, dreams that needed only a chance to flourish.
I love making these videos for you. If you liked this story, then please like, subscribe to my channel, and switch on the notifications for more entertaining stories. Please also leave a comment for any story suggestions.
"Welcome," Silas said once they'd all settled. "My grandmother, Eleanor March, believed that education could change lives. She grew up poor, but she loved learning, and that love carried her to places she'd never imagined. She started a company that created jobs for thousands of people and technology that made the world better, and she never forgot where she came from." He looked at their young faces, some skeptical, some eager, all paying attention. "You're here because someone saw potential in you, but more importantly, you're here because you saw potential in yourselves. You chose to spend your summer learning about science and technology instead of, I don't know, whatever it is middle schoolers do in the summer." A few girls laughed. "This camp is hard work. You're going to write code, conduct experiments, build robots, and probably mess up a lot. But you're also going to discover what you're capable of. And when you leave here in August, you'll know something important. You belong in science. You belong in technology. You belong anywhere you want to be." The girls erupted in applause, and Silas felt something he hadn't experienced in months: hope. Part 4. Claire. Her name was Claire Hartman, and Silas met her on a Tuesday afternoon in late September. He'd been at the foundation for 5 months, and the work had settled into a rhythm. The summer camp had been a success. Several girls had gone on to join their school's science clubs or robotics teams. Now they were planning the fall program, weekend workshops, and mentorship pairings. Claire showed up during volunteer orientation. She was 31, a software engineer at a startup downtown, with dark curly hair pulled back in a perpetually messy bun and kind brown eyes behind thick-framed glasses. She wore jeans and a Doctor Who t-shirt and seemed genuinely excited to be there. "I grew up in Inglewood," she told the group during introductions. "I was lucky, had a teacher who saw I was good at math and got me into a program like this one. Changed my whole life. So I guess I'm here to pay it forward." After the orientation, Silas found himself talking to her about program design. She had ideas, good ones, about making the curriculum more accessible without dumbing it down. "The problem with most STEM education," Claire said, "is that it assumes kids already speak the language. But you have to meet them where they are, connect the concepts to their actual lives." "That's exactly what we're trying to do," Silas said, excited. "Would you be willing to help design some workshops? We could use someone with your background." "Sure," Claire agreed readily. "This is important work." "Your grandmother must have been an amazing person." She was. The familiar grief tugged at him, but it was softer now, less sharp. "I miss her every day, but running this foundation, it helps. It feels like she's still here, in a way." Claire smiled. "That's beautiful." They met for coffee the following week to discuss the workshops, then again to refine the plans, then again just because. Silas found himself looking forward to these meetings, to Claire's enthusiasm and intelligence, and the way she laughed with her whole body. He didn't realize he was falling for her until Hannah Kim pointed it out. "You know she likes you, right?" Hannah said one afternoon when Claire had left after a planning session. "What? No, we're just colleagues." Hannah laughed. "Silas, she looks at you like you hung the moon, and you light up whenever she walks in the room. I do not." "You absolutely do. It's actually really cute. You should ask her out." "I can't," Silas said automatically. Then, more honestly, "I'm not ready. After Astrid." Hannah's expression softened. She knew the whole story. Silas had told her during a late-night working session when he'd had too much coffee and not enough sleep. "Astrid was a nightmare," Hannah said bluntly. Claire is the opposite of Astrid. She volunteers her time because she believes in the mission. She has a real job and a real life. She's not here for you. She's here for the kids. Exactly, which is why I shouldn't complicate things by asking her out. Or, Hannah countered, you could recognize that you've met someone genuinely good and not let your ex ruin your chance at happiness. Silas thought about it for days. He was cautious now in a way he'd never been before Astrid. That relationship had taught him that people weren't always what they seemed, that love could be faked, that he couldn't trust his own judgment. But Claire, she showed up every weekend to mentor the girls. She stayed late to help clean up after workshops. She bought supplies with her own money when the budget ran short. She genuinely cared, and not because there was anything in it for her. One Saturday in October, they took a group of girls to the Museum of Science and Industry. Claire had arranged for a private tour of the robotics exhibit, calling in a favor from a friend who worked there. Silas watched her explain binary code to a skeptical 12-year-old, breaking it down until the concept clicked, and the girl's face lit up with understanding. Afterward, when the girls were on the bus back to the brownstone, Silas and Claire walked through Jackson Park. The trees were turning, gold and red against the gray Chicago sky. "Thank you for today," Silas said. "The tour was incredible. Happy to help. Did you see Maya's face when she understood how the robot arm worked? That's why I do this. You're really good with them." Claire laughed. "I just remember being them, feeling like science was this exclusive club I didn't belong to. If I can make it feel less intimidating, that's everything." They walked in comfortable silence for a while. Then Silas heard himself say, "Would you want to get dinner sometime? Just us, not foundation business." Claire stopped walking. She looked at him with those kind eyes, and Silas's heart hammered in his chest. "Like a date?" she asked. "Yes, like a date. Unless that's weird, because we work together. Well, you volunteer, so maybe it's not weird. But if you're not interested, that's completely—" "Silas," she smiled, "I'd love to." "Really? I've been hoping you'd ask for weeks." They went to a small Italian place in Claire's neighborhood the following Friday. The conversation flowed easily. They talked about books and music, about childhood dreams and current anxieties, about everything and nothing. Claire had grown up poor but loved, the daughter of a single mother who worked 2 jobs to keep them afloat. She'd earned a full scholarship to Northwestern and never took her opportunities for granted. "My mom died 3 years ago," Claire said over tiramisu. "Breast cancer. I still pick up the phone to call her sometimes before I remember." "I'm so sorry," Silas said, reaching across the table to take her hand. "Thanks. It gets easier, but it never stops hurting, I'm guessing you know." "Yeah." He thought of Eleanor, of all the times he'd instinctively wanted to tell her something before remembering she was gone. "I do." "Tell me about her, your grandmother." So Silas did. He told her about Eleanor's sharp wit and fierce intelligence, about Sunday dinners and terrible puns, about the way she'd believed in him even when he didn't believe in himself. "She sounds wonderful," Claire said. She was. She would have liked you. "How do you know?" "Because you're real. That mattered to her more than anything." Claire squeezed his hand. "I'm glad you told me about her." They dated slowly, carefully. Silas was gun-shy, and Claire seemed to understand that without him having to explain. They went to museums and movies, took long walks along the lakefront, cooked dinner in Claire's tiny apartment. She met his friends, the few close ones who'd stuck by him after Astrid left. He met hers, a loud, loving group of women who'd known Claire since college and interrogated him thoroughly before deciding he was acceptable. It was easy and comfortable and real in a way Silas's relationship with Astrid had never been. Claire paid for her own dinners. She wasn't impressed by the foundation's budget. She was impressed by the work they did. She loved him, not for what he had, but for who he was. By December, Silas knew he was in love. They were at his apartment, watching snow fall outside the window, when he told her. "I love you," he said. The words simple and true. Claire looked up from where she'd been curled against his side. "Yeah?" "Yeah." "Good." She kissed him. "Because I love you too." That night, lying in bed with Claire asleep beside him, Silas thought about Astrid for the first time in weeks. He tried to summon anger or hurt, but found only pity. She'd been so focused on money that she'd missed everything that actually mattered. She'd walked away from something that could have been real because it didn't come with a big enough paycheck. He felt grateful, actually. If Eleanor had left him millions, he might never have known who Astrid truly was. He might have married her, spent his life with someone who loved his bank account instead of his soul. Eleanor had known. That last day in the hospice room, she'd tried to warn him. Not everyone loves you for the right reasons. She'd protected him, even in death, structured the will to reveal the truth. And in doing so, she'd set him free to find something genuine. Part 5. Karma. Silas heard about Astrid's downfall through a mutual friend, Marcus, who sent him a link with the message, "You dodged a bullet." It was a gossip blog post, the kind of thing Silas normally ignored, but he clicked through and read the whole thing, unable to look away from the train wreck. Astrid had moved on quickly after their breakup. According to the post, she'd been dating a venture capitalist named Derek Pennington within a month. Pennington was wealthy, twice divorced, and apparently quite taken with her. They'd been photographed at charity galas and museum openings, Astrid glittering in designer gowns, playing the role of sophisticated girlfriend. Pennington had proposed after 6 months. Astrid had said yes. The engagement had been announced in the society pages, complete with a photo of an absurdly large diamond ring. But then things had gone wrong. Pennington had decided to vet his bride-to-be. The post didn't specify why, but Silas could imagine. At that level of wealth, people were cautious. He'd hired a private investigator to conduct a background check. The investigator had been thorough. He'd tracked Astrid's romantic history and found a pattern. A string of relationships with wealthy or potentially wealthy men. An oil executive's son she'd dated in college. A trust fund kid she'd been with for 2 years before his grandfather died and left everything to an animal sanctuary. A surgeon she'd pursued until learning he was drowning in medical school debt. And Silas, the guy with the rich grandmother who'd had the poor taste to die and leave her money to charity instead of her grandson. Confronted with the evidence, Pennington had done something petty and brilliant. He dumped Astrid publicly at a fundraiser for the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, attended by roughly 200 of the city's wealthiest residents. According to witnesses quoted in the blog post, Pennington had given a short speech before making a donation. "I'd like to thank Astrid Lind for teaching me a valuable lesson," he'd said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "She taught me that some people view relationships as business transactions, that love can be faked convincingly, and that thorough due diligence isn't just for business deals." He then described her pattern of targeting wealthy men, backed up with the investigator's documentation projected on a screen for everyone to see. Photos of Astrid with her previous boyfriends, timeline of relationships, even bank records showing how she'd pressured them for expensive gifts and loans she'd never repaid. Astrid had fled the event in tears. The story had gone viral in Chicago society circles. She'd lost her job. The blog post was vague about why, but Silas suspected her employer didn't want the association. Her social media accounts had been deleted or locked down. She'd been exposed, humiliated, marked as a gold digger in a way that would follow her for years. Silas stared at the screen for a long time. He waited for satisfaction, for vindication, for the rush of righteous pleasure that should come from seeing someone who'd hurt him get what they deserved. But he felt nothing. Maybe pity. Maybe just relief that she was someone else's problem now. "What are you looking at?" Claire asked, coming into the room with 2 mugs of tea. "Nothing important." Silas closed the laptop and took the tea gratefully. They were at his apartment, spending a quiet Sunday morning together before heading to the foundation for a volunteer appreciation event. "Liar," Claire said mildly, sitting beside him. "You have your thinking face on." "My thinking face?" "Yeah, you get these little lines between your eyebrows when you're processing something heavy." She reached up and smoothed the spot with her thumb. "What's going on?" So Silas told her about the blog post, about Astrid's very public downfall. "Wow," Claire said when he'd finished. "That's intense. How do you feel about it?" "I don't know. I thought I'd feel happy or at least satisfied, but I just feel kind of empty." "That's because you're a good person," Claire said. "A lesser man would be gleeful. You're just relieved it's over." "Is that weird?" "No, it's one of the things I love about you." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "You're not vindictive. You don't hold grudges. You just want to do good work and be happy." "I am happy," Silas said, realizing it was true. "I'm really, genuinely happy." "Good. Me too." They sat together in comfortable silence, drinking tea and watching the city wake up outside the window. Silas thought about the path that had brought him here. Eleanor's death, Astrid's betrayal, the foundation, meeting Claire, all the pain and loss that had somehow led to purpose and love. "I wish my grandmother could have met you," he said. "I wish I could have met her, but I feel like I know her in a way. Her foundation, her values, they're all still here. You're keeping her alive through the work." That afternoon, at the volunteer appreciation event, Silas stood before a room full of people who'd given their time and energy to the Eleanor March Foundation. Claire was there, of course, but so were dozens of others, college students and retirees, corporate volunteers and stay-at-home parents, people from every background, united by a desire to make a difference. "Thank you," Silas said, his voice catching slightly. "Thank you for believing in this mission, for investing in these kids, for being the kind of people who show up and do the work. My grandmother built a company and made a fortune, but her real legacy isn't money. It's this. It's all of you and the kids whose lives you're changing." He caught Claire's eye across the room. She smiled at him, and he felt the full weight of his good fortune. Not fortune in dollars and cents, but in meaning and connection and love. Epilogue. 2 years later. The Eleanor March Foundation celebrated its second anniversary on a crisp October evening. The event was held at the Brownstone, with food and music and a presentation showcasing the impact they'd made. 147 girls through the summer camp program, weekend workshops reaching 400 students, partnerships with 12 schools, 4 mentorship cohorts, and a new initiative focused on computer science education. One of the first summer camp attendees, a girl named Jasmine Rodriguez, spoke about how the program had changed her trajectory. She was now in high school, captain of her robotics team, planning to study engineering in college. "Before the Eleanor March Foundation, I didn't think I belonged in science," Jasmine told the crowd. "I thought those spaces were for other people, not for girls from my neighborhood. But then I spent a summer coding and building robots and learning from people who believed in me. And I realized I could be anything I wanted to be." Silas stood at the back of the room, watching with tears in his eyes. Claire stood beside him, her hand in his. She wore a simple engagement ring, nothing like Astrid's ostentatious diamond that Silas had given her 3 months earlier during a walk through the park where they'd first gone on a date. "Eleanor would be proud," Claire whispered. "I hope so," Silas said. After the speeches, after the food and the mingling and the photographs, after the last volunteer had left and the staff had cleaned up, Silas and Claire stood alone in the 3rd floor classroom. It was the same room where Silas had welcomed the first group of girls, where he'd told them they belonged in science. "What are you thinking about?" Claire asked. "About how different my life could have been. If Eleanor had left me the money instead of creating the foundation. If Astrid had stayed. Would you change it, if you could?" Silas considered the question seriously. He thought about the work they'd done, the lives they'd touched, the purpose he'd found. He thought about Claire, about the genuine love they'd built together. "No," he said firmly, "I wouldn't change a single thing." He pulled out his phone and showed her something he'd been saving, an email from Eleanor's attorney, sent on the anniversary of her death. Apparently, Eleanor had left a letter with instructions to forward it to Silas 1 year later. Claire read it over his shoulder. "My dearest Silas, if you're reading this, a year has passed since I left you. I hope you've spent that year well, building the foundation and discovering your purpose. I want you to understand why I structured my will the way I did. It wasn't to punish you or because I didn't trust you with money. It was because I knew that inherited wealth would rob you of something precious. The opportunity to build your own life, to discover what you're capable of, to separate the people who love you from those who love your circumstances. I suspected, though I hoped I was wrong, that Astrid was with you for the wrong reasons. If I'd left you millions, you might never have known. You might have married her, spent your life with someone whose love was conditional on your bank balance. Instead, I gave you something better, meaningful work, the chance to make a real difference, and the freedom to find genuine love with someone who sees you for who you are. The foundation is my legacy, yes, but more importantly, it's your beginning. Build something wonderful, Silas. Be happy. Choose people who choose you for the right reasons. I love you forever, Gran. Claire wiped tears from her eyes. She really was amazing. Yeah, Silas agreed. She set the trap perfectly, and I'm grateful she did. They turned off the lights and locked up the brownstone, walking out into the Chicago night hand in hand. Behind them, the Eleanor March Foundation stood quiet and solid, a monument to the woman who'd understood that the greatest inheritance wasn't money, it was purpose, wisdom, and the chance to build something real. Astrid had walked into the trap seeking fortune and found nothing. Silas had walked through it and found everything. And somewhere, he liked to think, Eleanor was smiling. The end.
I love making these videos for you. If you liked this story, then please like, subscribe to my channel, and switch on the notifications for more entertaining stories. Please also leave a comment for any story suggestions.